Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 2. And guess what, kids? We're talking to Todd again. But you know how in the first episode we didn't really go into who Todd was or what does he do, like what was his journey, which you would love is like his story from when he was a kid all the way through to now and the transformation he's had on the way. Does that sound pretty cool?
Yes.
And did you like being in episode 1?
Yes.
And are you excited about being in episode 2?
Yes.
Alright, do you want to say, let's play the episode?
Let's play the episode.
Good job. See ya. Hey everyone, I just wanted to put in a quick trigger warning for whoever's listening. We get into some pretty deep conversations on this podcast episode. We talk about psychedelics, we talk about self-harm and a few things and how Todd's journey through that was where he is today. So it's a good conversation, but putting it out there that there's a little bit of could be a few triggers throughout the podcast. If you need help or want help in a direction of where you need to go to find help, we've got in the show notes links for where Todd is in the US, links for in Australia where you can go seek help. And if you have any questions or would just like to talk to either Todd or I, there's links to our socials where you can message us directly, and we would love to have a chat. Please don't feel like you're alone. Go seek help. Hey everyone, welcome back. Episode 2. And the biggest feedback we got from episode 1 was, funnily enough, it's got questions like, who the fuck is Todd? Like, who's Todd? So I thought, well, it makes sense. Let's just talk about Todd. So I'm going to put it straight on you, mate, and just say, who is Todd? Who are you? Give us a little bit of a rundown. Like, what's been your journey? What kind of stumbling blocks you've overcome? And we'll kind of riff off it as we go, which is kind of cool. I'm kind of excited because it's just going to lead wherever it's going to go. It's okay, go. Well, who is Todd?
Man, going back to, grew up in a small town in upstate New York. I think in hindsight, my parents did a good job of like sheltering me from certain things, from the world in general. There's a lot of growing up I had to do and maturing as time went on, but we'll get to that. Really a lot of my memories, I don't have like a ton of like specific memories, except like sports was a big part of my life. My father, just drilled that in there from, at a young age all the way up. And I happened to be, I had an inclination for basketball. I was a ball boy for like the 8th grade for like 4 or 5 years. So I was around it, and then, it just made sense to me. So sports pretty much took over. And so, I get through high school. School came, relatively easy for me. Sports, it was fun. Where I didn't feel like I had my friends, but like, I just constantly felt like I wanted to be liked and wanted, I felt like I needed that growing up. I think one of the biggest kind of turning points in my life was, I was really, what I wanted to be was like, I wanted to be a math teacher and I wanted to be a coach. And I figured being a math teacher, obviously I was in the school system, so I'd be close to any of the sports, ideally basketball, and become a coach. I could, and really what I wanted to do was connect with the kids on an educational level, but also, be able to help them in, the athletic world. And so, but there was something that happened. So 2 years into college, I fortunately got the opportunity to go play Division III college basketball. And
Nice. Well, compared to it's probably like professional level in Australia, Division 3 in America. But yeah.
So I got the opportunity, and that was really awesome. But 2 years in, my dad was really sick. My mom and dad had been sick for a little bit, like high school and then into college. My dad was struggling with cancer, and then the summer that he passed away in July. Let me back up a little bit. He was still alive. I came home the summer before, I believe, and we went to a chiropractic appointment. And he said, come along with me. It was one of
Mm.
those where, I was a college kid. I wanted to sleep in. And, he's like, no, I'll get up and go with me. And our chiropractor he's pretty awesome. He was in the sports. Um, and so I went on this trip with him. And it was, like I said, it was sitting there. It's supposed to be a normal trip. And we get in the room and, the chiropractor walks in and he's like, hey, who wants to go first? And, my dad looks at me and kind of, you go ahead. They get up there and we're talking and he treats me, everything's going really well. He's asking me about school, and my dad happened to be in the middle of like a workers comp case. He had gotten injured. He was a bus driver. He had gotten injured.
Mm.
He actually drove the bus for the kids with like physical like certain needs, and
Yep.
so he actually was trying to pick up a kid. He was kneeling in the seat in front, went to pick him up, move him in his car seat, because this particular kid needed a car seat to travel, and blew his back out at a really bad disc herniation. So back to the moment we're in this room, and so then my chiropractor asks, he says, hey Terry, how you doing? Terry's my father's name. And it was really the first time I saw my father emotional. And now try to picture like, a 5'10", 350 pound, like bearded, like, yeah, he was a big guy. He was,
The
yeah, he
bear.
was a bear. Yeah. His nickname was Bubba. Okay. But he was like, he had a big heart, and, all the kids and all my friends, like that, Bubba was the man. Anyways, I didn't see him emotional very often. And
Yeah.
when the chiropractor asked him how things were going, he started getting emotional, and like I was really shocked and surprised. And basically, the workers comp was giving him, like he actually had a legit case, and they were going to court with it and everything. And he said they were giving him a hard time, like they didn't think that he was bad enough to not work. And um, I remember these words, and I'll never forget them because they changed the course of my life. The chiropractor looked at him and looked at my father. I mean, with this energy that was so sincere, and he said, Terry, he was like, I think there was probably a cuss word in there. He was like, "What the f?" He's like, "I'll get on the stand for you." He's like, "I'll go to war for you." He's like, "I'll
Mm.
fight for you." He's like, "There's no way that you can work. There's like you're injured. Like there's just no way you can work." And it was that moment that everything changed in my
Mm.
life. I immediately went back after my freshman year, that summer, like after that appointment, I went back. I went to my advisor and I said, "I'm done with math. I want to become a science major.
Ah.
I want to do pre med, and I want to go help people. I want to go fight for people." And that's kind of like what changed, really everything for me. And as far as like my education and everything like that, the rest is history. I mean, I finished pre-med. I went to, the simple, not simple, excuse me, the natural transition seemed to be, let's go be a chiropractor. Hopefully they're all like this. They really want to help people.
Yeah, yeah.
And then fast forward, we can talk about another time, like the different things that I've picked up in my philosophies and all that. But essentially, yeah, that's what brought me to wanting to help people, wanting to fight for people. And now, 2 years later, or excuse me, almost 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to take things online and help people in a different way. There, but there was one other. I mean, I can fill in all the gaps. Like I graduated school, chiropractic college, 2009. We traveled around a little bit, finding different jobs we weren't really happy with, and we decided we wanted to be owners. Like we didn't really want to go work for anybody, and we also wanted to create a place where people wanted to come work for us, or work with us. And so we buy a practice in Massachusetts, and about three years in, my wife is pregnant with our first son,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I am going through some of the darkest stuff I've ever been through, and I don't know why I'm going through it. I
Hmm.
was uh, I didn't go see anybody, but I had if I had, I would imagine I'd be labeled or diagnosed with depression. I was also having some like suicidal ideology, and it scared the shit out of me. I was waking up every day, and it was like to get out of bed, just to get out of bed and go take a shower, just felt like something so insurmountable. Like I just couldn't do it, and it took me all the strength I had to do that, and then I would just go sit on the couch until we had to leave, and I would make it through the
Mm.
day. I would still be treating people. I would make it through the day, and then at the end of the night, I would figure out a reason to stay here for an extra hour or two, just avoiding going home, and get home and just kind of sit there. And actually, during the time, I was using cannabis a lot to like cope because it was really hard to be in my own head, and it was yeah, it was just super difficult to, and I didn't really understand it. It's like I have this beautiful wife and a son on the way. I have a practice, and there's something that is just not sitting right, and I don't know where it came from. I didn't feel like I had any reason to be upset or depressed or anything like that, and yeah, so here I am. I'm working. I'm trying to make it through the days, and I don't know. I had tried some therapy and stuff in the past, and kind of got turned off, um, and I happened to
Mm.
see, I think Chris's are meant to be in my life. Guys named
Haha.
Chris, because another mentor of mine, his name's Chris. I went to chiropractic college with him. He's down in New Jersey, and if we're doing shout outs, we can do free shout outs, right? Like, if you want to look at like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
barefoot, they're a New Jersey barefoot rehab clinic in New Jersey. Um,
Barefoot rehab.
yeah,
I'll put it in
yeah,
the show
Chris is
notes.
great. He was talking about on his social media about like the stuff I was going through, like depression, and even some of the suicidal ideation that he had, and some of the words that he was speaking about. Like I literally messaged him, and I was like, "Hey man, like you're in my head." I was like, "There's something going on right now, and I don't know what it is." And um, I guess I need some help, and he said, we spoke for a
Mm.
little bit, and at the time he was doing some healing ceremonies, or some psychedelic ceremonies, and he had asked, "Come on down," and I didn't really feel like I had anywhere else to turn, and I missed the first month, the opportunity there, and I circled back around, and I was going back and forth with my wife, and I was like, I don't know, I was like, I think I really got to do this. I was like, I don't know where else to turn. I can't live the rest of my life this way,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel like I was going to make it past like 42. Like, that's just how it felt. I don't know why that number stuck in my head, but it did. And so I remember it was September. It was the weekend, or the month of my birthday. I was like, I'm going to go down and give this a shot. And
Mm.
what an experience! And it really showed me. It woke me up. I'll say 33 years like being asleep in this world was. It was it was an awakening of sorts. And it's not to say that like the past 7-8 years have been, this like, I figured out all the secrets to the world and things like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm certainly the past 7 to 8 years would, like, without that experience, and without finding, and asking the right questions to the right people, and looking to figure out who I am and why I'm here, and all of these, fantastic questions, I don't think it would have come about, excuse me, if it wasn't for that experience. And since then, I've had, a number of those experiences, but ultimately, that's what leads us all the way up to here. Probably kept.
And then, nah, you're right. I was thinking like more like a trigger warning, maybe, in the sense, not the trigger warning, but when you did the psychedelics and that experience, it was all in a very safe environment, and it was
Yeah,
controlled. It was with a support, all those kinds of things, which like you hear on other podcasts when anyone ever, like Tim Ferriss, whoever mentioned it, it's always through a structured way of doing it. So you're completely
yeah.
safe. You're not doing it out
Yeah,
the
yeah,
back on
yeah.
a
So
swing,
these weren't,
so
yeah,
to
just to be clear, yeah, these
speak.
weren't taking things on a whim, and I'll never, never ever like recommend that. Like, this was definitely a controlled, supported. There was intention, there was a lot of these things. Um, yeah, I've heard of, some of those experiences as well, and that it was far far from those experiences, but I know that it can,
Yeah.
without people actually, going through or experiencing some of those things, I was somebody who thought, like, I grouped a lot of different things into what drugs were. Like, growing up, it was like all drugs
Mm.
were bad, and, every drug in the world is bad, and these things are labeled drugs, but yet, I watched my dad drink every day. Um, so it was like those things that was okay, and I watched my mom smoke every day. I love you guys, but
Yeah.
those weren't drugs, right? But
Yeah.
all these other things were really bad. Stay away from them. And it changed. It really shifted my mind on those things. And I know I do recommend, like, please go. If you're interested in it, reach out. Or there are places around the world that I would highly recommend that you can travel to and have deep ancestral wisdom guidance with those things. So, um,
It's kind of, there's lots of good science coming out about it. I'm not looped into it, besides just like listening to bits and pieces coming through on podcasts, but the science coming out of it is pretty awesome. I think Tim Ferriss himself is actually starting funding for psychedelic research. So that's
yeah,
pretty cool. On the thing you mentioned, like going back to when your firstborn was coming and the depression hit hard, I could that theme was very similar to me when Theo was coming. A little bit different in the sense like I had a gym that I moved and merged into a mate's boxing gym, and then we just personality wise we just did not work, which makes sense. Like boxing and like a nurturing, caring kind of coach relationship, those two things just didn't gel. And it turned out later on down the track he had some other mental health issues going on that made so much more sense. But it was like leading into, yeah, getting married with Kat, and then a year later we had a kid. The whole lead up was me juggling this gym stuff, getting very depressed while trying to figure out what to do with this guy, and then ended up having to pull all my stuff out. And then we got married a month after I shut my part of the gym, and then figuring out how to go online. But yeah, the theme was the same, and I was kind of, when I journaled it. Let me know if this rings true to you, but when I was journaling, it was like we talked about grief the last call, and it was almost sort of the same thing of like I was really scared to let go of who I was to become a dad. And then also the unknown, which is what I try and lean into now, is the unknown a little bit. Like I'm not gonna, like I will figure it out, but I don't know the path. But back then I was like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do. And then for me, I think a lot of it come through as like, am I going to be like my parents? Like, there's good traits from my parents, and there's also really shit ones, like all parents. Like we had that. I think everyone's got that story, but there was definitely ones that I didn't want to bring through, and I was very concerned that they were. So, like, was that kind of what you were going through too? Like, this whole thing is like your whole world's going to be flipped upside down, and it's like I don't know what it's going to be.
I honestly, I don't know that I. There have been, like, fleeting moments of those thoughts, but
Mm.
until you spoke about it yourself, I don't think and maybe people saw, like, the wheels turning. I don't think I thought about it that way until you were sharing what you were sharing, and I believe that was a big part of it. Especially grief for a number of things. I don't believe that and I have through some of, like, the healing ceremonies that I've done, but I believe I also had about, let's see, at that time, I'm trying to remember, let's see, it was 20, so 13, roughly 13 years of grief built up from the loss of my father. I don't think I properly
Yeah.
grieved him, and what he meant to me.
Mm.
And a lot of that has come out in multiple of this, like, ceremonies and healing things that I've done. But I think you're absolutely right, because one of the things I left out that was another, like, pivotal moment for me wasn't it was in during the time that I was experiencing this depression. Was It was so I was still experiencing it when Chase was born, and I remember. So now we're about
Mm.
6 months in. whenever they start to go on their tummies, right? You try to give them tummy time and just let them hang out there so they can build up like their back and you know
Yeah, straight away we go to like training
yeah.
stuff so they can build up their back and all
Put
that.
up
So
their hand,
everyone's like,
but
we just put
just
them on
put
their
it, yeah.
tummy.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, and I got down on the floor and I'm looking like into his eyes because he's got it, he's kind of slightly lifting his head up and stuff. And honestly, there was a moment where it felt like it was forever. And I looked into his eyes and I saw like a lot of my past. I saw, this
Hmm.
future, and this is where that like the number 42 stuck out. And I saw what was going on right now. And there was something inside me that said if you don't take care of yourself you won't be here like when you're 42 or after 42. Like there was just something that, and I don't know why that's always stuck with me. And that was the moment that like really woke me up. Oh, and it was a quick reminder of like getting up and down from the floor. I could feel like my joints and my back, and like I wasn't taking care of myself at that time. And so there was this moment where we locked eyes that completely changed everything. And getting back to your question, yes, there was a lot of grief because there was a lot of, like you said, aspects of like my parents that I loved and adored. But there were also a lot of things that I found out later on in life as I did more healing and stuff that still I carry. Sometimes it's in the way that I respond to things, the way that I show up for my kids. I hear my father's voice. I feel not like how he was with me and possibly how his dad was with him. And it's harsh. It's a harsh voice. And I'm working
Yeah.
really hard to calm that and approach, particularly Chase, my oldest, because I feel like throughout his early years, there's a lot of stuff I've already projected onto him. And I'm working really hard at showing up as a different human so that way I can help him in this process unlearn all the things that I've already kind of transplanted, if you will, or already imprinted on him. And it it it's a struggle. Like it's a struggle because there's not only do I have to show up in those moments and be different than how I was shown, um, but also provide space for myself to process it when I'm not being who I want to be in that moment because of the past conditioning and things like that. So, but yes, going back to your question too, all of that moment with my son, I believe was a part of that grief process of like, you've got to get your stuff together. Like this is not who you want it to be. This is not how you want to show up in the world. And if this continues, then you're not going to be able to play with your kids. You're not going to be able to, have that freedom to enjoy life and show them what life is all about. Because I don't want to be a hypocrite in that sense. I want them to know and be shown by their mother and I that we walk the walk and talk the talk, walk the walk. So yeah, if that makes
Okay, yeah.
sense.
And then yeah, and I'm like that first psychedelic session was kind of like a circuit breaker. What was the process coming out of that, like to get you back in alignment? Like I think we were talking about not on the call last time, but some other time, like getting back to baseline. What was the stuff you kind of put in place to get yourself back after that first
Yeah,
psychedelic
great
session?
question. A lot of the basics. It was going to bed, taking the TV out of the bedroom. Started with simple things
I
like
know that is
that.
insane. Like people will fight
Yeah,
us on that so much. It's like it's my one-on-one time with my wife. I'm like,
no,
is it
yeah,
though?
yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but yeah,
uh,
nah,
yeah.
yeah, it's not
Yeah,
really.
so that was one of the biggest ones I remember was taking the TV out of the bedroom so that could be, a focus around
Mm,
getting proper sleep. Um, I started the first really book that I bought and dove into was Carol Dweck's Mindset, and then yeah, and
yeah,
it
no,
was just a domino from there. But it was getting back to the basics. It was feeding, fueling myself, getting enough sleep, exercising regularly, all of those things. I just got back to just figuring out the basics, and you know, f- what I found was it wasn't so hard to do those things. It was like, how consistently could I do those things? And I think that's what everybody finds. Um, but I know along the way too, what I was battling, and it's just what we talked about, was this old self that needed to die. Um, and that was really hard. Like those ego deaths and those deaths are like you're letting go, and I understand why people hold on to them because they're comfortable. I call it a 7-year dance with alcohol. This year will be, in October, will be 2 years alcohol free, but it was like a dance. It was a dance leading up to that moment where I finally said enough's enough. Like I no longer get anything from this. Even it was like the last. I remember the
Mm.
last glass I took was a glass of red wine with my wife, and I wanted to share it with her. And when I got done, I literally set the glass down and I was like, hmm, "This is it. Like this is that moment. Like I don't want this anymore. I don't ever want it. Just it's not serving me in any way." Um, and that's what I found. I guess by sharing that, that's what I found to be the moment in all of these cases when I had to let go of the old me. It was that conversation that I had with myself that said, "Is this serving me, or is this no longer serving me?" And have that deep conversation with myself, so I can make it very clear that, okay, maybe that something here is still serving me, but something this isn't. So I need to let this go. Um, and those conversations aren't easy by any means.
No, and it just brought up something because like I was an alcoholic before I met Kat and had kids, and I gave that away. And something you mentioned was like even the way you talked about it, it was like this sense of like I don't need it anymore. And the way I quit being an alcoholic, and we could talk about that another time. But when I was coming out of it, the thing I realized was that to make it really easy was to see if I could socialize
Mm,
without it. And it turned out I was better socially without it than I was on it. Because everyone was telling me, like, oh, I can actually understand what you're saying. Or you're not leaning against the pole or whatever it was that I was doing. And you're not getting kicked out halfway through the night. The All those things were happening. And then when I got rid of it, I went into another addiction, which was energy drinks, just to be able to stay out with my mates and have a good time. But I was having a way better time than I was on alcohol. And I think that was like that whole letting go thing. As soon as like it becomes like it's not easier to let go, but tell me what you think. But I do believe that like whatever those past behaviors are that help us get through stuff, like the safety behaviors, we do naturally let it go once we realize that we're actually better without that thing. So like for me, like even just recently, it's like social media apps on my phone. I found that I was being my worst dad by a mile and worst partner by a mile when they were on my phone.
mm,
And as soon as I got rid of them, I just had more space, like you were talking about before, that space to sort of process or interpret, like we were sort of talking about the other day, interpret what inputs were coming into me. And yeah, it's super interesting. It just sort of triggered that part in the sense of like, if you, again, trigger warning, if you are like struggling with an addiction or anything, go get help. There's always different ways of figuring it out. And you're not alone. So if you want to chat to us, just reach out to us because we're happy just to hear your story and work you through it. But yeah, letting go is tough. Like even just thinking, talking about it now, I'm getting a bit gut reaction to it. When you got to let go of that identity that you've labeled on yourself, it's a big move and it's a pretty powerful move. Like when you started, like, can you picture one time you let go on an identity that made a big shift for you? Do you have one in your mind that you can think of that no longer served you?
mm. Off the top of my head, um, well, I think one of the things, and I think there's layers to it sometimes, as well.
Mm,
So
yes.
uh, I think one of the things I think it's pretty obvious is just the business owner aspect, like like
Mm.
identifying that I'm a business owner and I am in, full control over everything that happens in here. And that's like that, that takes the wind out of you for a second too, but just for a second, because I also see the opportunity and I have a massive amount of confidence in myself that I'm going to accomplish what I set out my mind, what I set my mind to. And so owning, the chiropractor, so maybe something a little bit more about myself, but so we are chiropractors and we
You're
own
right.
and I own co-own with my wife. So um, that that was a big step for me because when we got in here, I still just felt like we're two little kids coming out of chiropractic college. Because we got no business um, training in college. It was all like the art of chiropractic, and so when you're out here trying to run this thing, you're like I don't know. And there was just some moments where I got challenged where I had to put down the identity of I want to be mindful that I don't trigger anybody, but like, the way I view it in my head was like I'm the victim, or, I'm like the world still needs to treat me this way because I don't know how to be the best business person. And I had to let
Yeah.
go of that and be like, well, if you don't know, figure it out. And and how,
Mm.
there's ways to figure it out. You either hire somebody, you ask somebody, or you go read about it. And then, I think the other one that gets massively overlooked is try, fail, learn, and then just keep doing that over and over again. And that was a big shift for me, was owning, really owning the identity of being a business owner. um, and like I said, there's layers to it because even to this day I'm finding ways to take more massive, ownership over how I show up as a business owner for both now, the in person and online. How about yourself?
Yeah, it just brought up, because it's super interesting because you're like, because you got to play in like two or three different worlds just in your work. Because you got your chiropractor work where you're hands-on the person. You got the chiropractor work where you're doing the behind the scenes work, and then you got your online coaching where you're helping dads move, like get back to alignment and get to wherever they want to go. So removing the anchors, getting back in shape, all those things, so they can open up their world to wherever they want to be. So there's like three identities you're playing with there, which is really interesting because I was on a call with the King's Crew guys yesterday and we were talking about, and something came up for me. Do you remember Jason Kalipa from the
Oh yeah.
CrossFit Games? And you remember, did you ever read his MRAP mentality
No.
book? It's super cool book. Highly recommend it. Anyone listen to it. Very cool. Nothing new. Talks about deep focus in a different way and time blocking. But he talks about the challenges his family went through where one of his kids got really sick. And the MRAP mentality was what got him through. How he built in NC Fitness and got it to this huge fitness company. But I think it'd be really cool to talk about in a sense, really briefly. Like, we all have different roles as parents, where you might have your business, and then you got so for us, we've got the business admin side, we've got the coaching side, and the guidance and the mentoring. And then we also got like dad life. Then we've got like the partner, and then potentially the tribe, like your friends and family external of the immediate family. So you got all these different hats. And the way he talked about, which I wrote down yesterday because it's like triggered me again, and because I like CrossFit, just don't like the silly stuff. The MRAP mentality just sort of was like, oh, that's what I need to sort of word it, in the sense of you go all in on that one thing in that one moment and be hyper focused. And so you can transition to the next one and do the same thing. Like typical, like guys are pretty bad at multitasking anyway. So it's probably going to suit, it's going to suit us dads way more. the, but the kind of what you were saying just sort of brought that up in the sense of like not having too much crossover. And like the way I kind of set up, I was just going on a complete tangent, but the way I'm trying to set up my perfect average day is I play in each world in very particular chunks. And it kind of works like that, where I knock off at 2:30, brain dump everything, and then it's just dad mode and being a good partner, which sounds really weird. Being a supportive partner to Kat for the rest of the afternoon. That's generally how I try and set my days all the time, only because we need to do it that way because of Kat's work and everything. But that MRAP mentality, I think, is just like is a really useful thing. So anyone who's listening, I recommend it for you too, Todd. Like, have a read of the book because it's super powerful. But it just talks about like going all in on that thing you're doing right now and being hyper focused. So if you with your kids, you're all in with your kids. And the one thing for me is like going on date nights with Kat. It's dropped off heaps. So I need to start dating my wife again because I haven't been all in on that. Like we've been doing the supportive thing, the fair play card game to sort of divvy up the roles for each of us, so we're not overloaded cognitively as a running the family. But yeah, that is one big piece I'm missing, and just you talking about it just sort of made me realize like we do have all these different roles and different identities that show up in each role, which is where that's what I was coming back around to. Like our personality or the way we do our business self could be different to the way we do our guidance coaching version of us, which generally will be different to the way we do our parenting, our dad life. And it would probably be a little bit different to our partner. So those three different identities, which could be really challenging for people to juggle. Like I know there's crossover, but there's definitely certain traits you don't want to bring over. Like I don't want to bring my business admin
Yeah.
click and just get things done back to my dad life.
Yeah.
Like because it doesn't work. Like what we're noticing with Theo is that letting go, like you said, even though it's for like letting go like identities that don't serve us anymore, it's like letting go of control of what's going to happen or what I think needs to happen in dad life. What do I need the kids to do to make it easier for me? When the easy part, now that I've started to realize it, is just letting go, not being in like a parent that just lets them
Right.
play with knives in the backyard, but
Yeah.
but like boundaries, but like letting go of control.
Here's a bike. There's traffic.
Like,
Go ahead. No.
yeah,
I get it.
don't need your
Yeah,
helmet.
you're good.
Just ride with your eyes closed.
And
It's
a
cool.
knife. And carry the knife. No, I get, yeah, it's but I think something I've been trying to work on too is there are these kind of hats or ways that I feel like you got to show up in business, right? And at home and even in the online business. But what I feel like I'm trying to get to is and this happened during like the process of like getting rid of like these like identities and things that didn't serve me,
Mm.
because one of the things I had to wrap my head around was like there was a moment where I said, you know what, I feel more drained energetically, and I feel that way because I feel as if I'm showing up as a different person in all these different crowds. I have like, and this
Mm.
was when I was going through like the whole craft beer scene. I felt really like at certain
Nah.
times, like I was like all the new breweries and this or that. Like there was, I think during that process, I felt really inauthentic. And there was a moment where I had to like let go of that. But it was in that during that time period is when I had to be like, I had to recognize that, oh man, I was like, if I go hang out with like my sister and my brother-in-law, I'm a big drinker and I'm this person. And then when I, go to these events or go to these breweries, I'm a drinker and, this. And then I come back to, like the work that I do as a chiropractor, and I'm supposed to be this person who's teaching people about health and how to live a healthy lifestyle. And that's where things clashed for me. And that's where I had to ask myself, how is it that you want to show up in the world? And what I'm getting at with what you shared is, I I find I fight less with I don't have that fight in me because I'm trying to figure out, and I think it goes back to the very first question of like who you are. The more that I
Yeah.
can focus in and really get to know who I am, um, I think it's less about it's less about the hats and the different kind of ways I compartment my life, that I get to just show up as Todd in those. and then I get to take the characteristics of being a good business owner, of being a good coach online, of being a good partner, and that one is
Mm.
even, I just being, I don't think, yes, being a good partner, because I think there are ways, like whether you're trying to understand their love language or how to communicate better, but all in all, I want it to come from a place of like, who is Todd, and how does Todd want to relate, or have a relation with each of those things. And when I can get really still and know who I am, and show up in those ways, I find that flow and that AMRAP mentality is a lot easier to sink into, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So, hopefully, I want to make sure I'm articulating that well, but I want to make sure I want to come more from a place of like, this is who I am, and this is how I show up in each of these compartments. And yes, it's going to be different how you show up, because it's going to take, different aspects of who you are to become a really good business leader, a good coach, and so on and so forth. But I still want to, deep down at the core, be Todd, and understand who that person
Mm.
is and how they learn and grow into being a better human, and then how that human shows up in all those different worlds, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. And it's kind of leads into like what we said last episode, depending on when it comes out. The the like holding space. And I was plotting out this like this journey, this expedition thing I want to do, which I'll talk about another time with parents. And I was like, what is balance? And what is like improving relationships? And I went back and I was like, know thyself. Like it gets mentioned a lot, but it's really hard to for me to be a fully present dad or partner to I actually am fully present for myself without making this sound like really woo woo or wanky. You don't need to go away into the forest and meditate for 2 hours. It's more just like dulling down the noise. So for me, as an example, and some dads might relate with this, or anyone might relate to this. Any moment I had of that could have been a quiet moment, I had my headphones on, listening to a podcast to be productive and learn. And it was all the time. And I would podcast when I'm getting the kids ready in the bath. I would podcast when I go out and take, like, literally just going from the kitchen to take the rubbish to the bin. I'd turn a podcast on, and it'd be like 30 seconds. Any moment there was a space to have quiet, I would lean into listening to a podcast or be trying to read something that will help me grow on Twitter. And it took a lot of like prompting to sort of unpack that, where I was pushing down the silence and whatever thoughts that would be coming up with it, and just trying to push it down because there's something there that was telling me that I was just doing something that I don't really like. And it was like a safety behavior. And alcohol was my safety behavior originally because I was in a job that I absolutely hated. It was boring as, wasn't passionate about it, but I just drank to keep myself there. Looking back on it, back then I was drinking because of a lot of things, but looking back, a lot of it was based on that. And even the podcasting thing is really interesting in the sense that I use that as my safety behavior now. Like when I'm getting a little antsy or something's uncomfortable, just that feeling of uncomfortable, I lean into my safety behavior, which is podcasting or learning, reading a book. And I'll just reduce into my shell. When now it's like, especially in the last 6 months to 18 months, it's like, why am I uncomfortable? What is it that's making me feel uncomfortable? What can I learn from it? And it's kind of that we talked about in King's Crew last week. Again, King's Crew, it's in the show notes if you want to learn more about it. And I talked about it last week as well. But the way the brain works, where the input we have coming into our head, we have no control over. Our interpretation of whatever comes in, we have 100% control over. And the output, we kind of do, kind of don't, kind of depends on what's going on around us. So it's that middle piece that we've really only got control over. And so I was getting inputs and it was making me feel uncomfortable. So my interpretation was that was to push it down. And I think when I became a dad, that happened a lot too. Where I did have depression or just depressive states. I would say I never got clinically diagnosed as having depression until later. But during those times, it was like, yeah, there was this gut thing coming up. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I going to be a good dad? I've stuffed up so much in the past. Am I going to stuff this up too? And I became a stay-at-home dad too, so it was just
Mm.
constant there. And then same thing, I would be, yeah, escape into the safety behaviors. Which when I had Theo at home, it was just us just chilling out watching movies. We just watched movies and movies and movies, stay-at-home dadding non-stop. It was crazy, and it was just for me to just switch everything down. And no wonder why he loves movies now. He literally
Yeah,
got. I just implanted that on him for like 2
yeah.
years. But yeah, I don't know. I went off on a bit of a
No,
tangent there, but it was like,
I, yeah, I think it's
sorry, you go.
I think it's important to. I think a lot of people are whether it's the phone. I think that we are distracting ourselves, for a number of reasons. I actually just recently spoke with. She was a client at one point, and she had reached back out and was saying she was ready, and she talked about how she was like eating out of boredom, and
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong. Any special or anybody who has a specialty in what I'm about to talk about, but what I found for myself is that I wasn't eating out of boredom. I was eating because it was a safety behavior. When I was, when
mm,
I was really when I was feeling really uneasy in my body, um, what I do, I went and got food. That's what made me feel comfort. And I think a lot of people, I still catch myself with the phone. I still catch myself, but um, yeah, the cannabis at the time, when I was going through my depression was that safety behavior. And now I look back and I thank it because I don't know that I would have gotten through without it, without numbing me a little bit to some degree or something, but
mm,
um,
yes.
like
I was going to talk about that
there
too.
there are these things that have helped us cope. I think when people look back, I'm not saying that we need to thank alcohol or whatever it is. It's just um, I became much more appreciative of like the experiences that I went through instead of looking at them. Hmm, I just look, as a learning opportunity, because there was a long time
Yeah.
where I said no to cannabis, and I was like, I'm done with that, like because I had associated it with my depression, and then I looked back, and at one point there was this like revelation where it was like, no, like that helped you through, because there probably would have been times that you know, I guess what scared me the most, Chris, was I would be driving to work and there's these big overpasses from some of the major highways, and I was like seriously contemplating how do I make this look like an accident. And what
Mm,
scared me the most was when I've convinced myself and that switch goes off in my mind, it's really hard to come back from it. And I felt myself inching closer and closer and closer to that moment that I was going to flip that switch. I know I went off on a tangent with all that, but coping mechanisms, safety behaviors, and just being aware, just having that awareness, I think, and that awareness gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think that's what's really cool about this life is after all this time and after 8 years of doing some of the deep spiritual work, this came up while you were talking. After one of the ceremonies, we were sitting out on the back deck, and I asked this question. I was like, oh man, I was like, I'm really frustrated with myself. There was During that ceremony, I felt like I circled back around something that I had healed. And
mm,
people are just put in your life at certain times, and this human, he he had such a beautiful response, and he said, he goes, you're not like healing these things and you're done with them. He said you're integrating them. And he's like, I want you to
mm,
think of like this winding staircase, and you've got this thing in the middle. And he's like, maybe like the last ceremony, you were ascending the staircase, and you looked at it from like this angle, and you were like, oh, okay, I see it from this angle. Ah, I get it. And then he's like, you ascend the staircase even more, and now you're looking at it from a different angle. And he was like, and now you see it from like a different angle with new experiences and um, just a whole set of new eyes. And he's like, and at some point you're going to revisit this again from a different angle. And I was like, and it just like took like what I thought was this like completely failed ceremony. And he turned it completely around. And that's how I've looked at my life ever since. Is like, I feel like it's deja vu, like the Matrix, right? But it's not deja vu, or it could be, because have you learned from this or not? And if you want this to keep showing up this way, then you haven't learned from it. But if it shows up and you have the opportunity to reflect, maybe it's showing up in just a slightly different way. And it's still giving you an opportunity to learn from it. And I hope that landed and resonated. I love these talks because it kind of goes all over, but sometimes, like that's.
I don't want to add any to that. That was an awesome way to, I think, finish it up. Like leaving on that note is perfect. Again, if anyone is having suicidal thoughts or is really, really struggling, please go out and reach out to help. Todd and I will put some links in the show notes for the different countries you're in to go reach out to people, or just reach out to us and we'll point you in the right direction, or even just listen to you. Sometimes that's all we need. So if you are struggling with any of that stuff, please reach out. Don't feel like you're alone, because you're not. And talking to someone will be probably like, it's a hard step initially, but it's the best step. And I'm happy to just jump on, and Todd will be too. We'll just jump on and we'll just listen.
You're never alone.
But I think that was awesome, Todd. That was a really cool insight into you. And I think, we've got so much more to talk about. More to come in more episodes. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll put in the show notes how you can reach out to us, talk to us, find out how to work with Todd, find out how to work with me. And till next time. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.